They warned her. They warned her with every breath they had. But on the night the moon turned blood red over the village of Amara, she opened it anyway. And nothing would ever be the same again. Deep in the heart of West Africa, where the red earth breathes beneath your feet and the baobab trees stand like ancient guardians, there was a village called Amara. Amara was not an ordinary village. Its people did not simply live on that land, they belonged to it. Every sunrise, every harvest, every birth, and every burial, all of it tied to a covenant older than any living memory. The elders spoke of a time before their grandfathers' grandfathers when the spirit of the land struck a sacred agreement with the people of Amara. We will protect you, the spirit said. We will give you rain, harvest, and peace. But in return, one thing must never be touched. At the center of the village, beneath the shadow of the oldest baobab tree, sat a clay pot, dark, ancient, sealed with black wax and wrapped in dry palm leaves that no one ever dared remove. Children were never allowed to play near it. Women curved their paths to walk around it. Even the village chief, the most powerful man in Amara, bowed his head when he passed it. No one asked what was inside, because in Amara, asking that question was itself a kind of sin. Her name was Adaeze. She was 23 years old, with sharp eyes that never seemed to rest, and a mind that worked faster than the river in rainy season. She was the kind of woman people noticed, not because she was loud, but because she was always watching, always thinking, always asking why. And in a village where why was not a welcome question, Adaeze was always a little bit out of place. She had her mother's cheekbones and her father's restless mind, both of which in Amara were considered equally dangerous. She was not rebellious the way people imagine rebels to be, loud and defiant and angry. Adaeze was quiet, observant, the kind of person who sat in the back of a room and understood everything that was happening in the front. She had grown up asking questions that made the elders uncomfortable, not because she wanted to disrespect anyone, but because she could not understand a rule she could not follow all the way back to its beginning. Why do we not open the pot? The answers were always the same. Because the ancestors said so. Because it has always been this way. Because some things are not meant to be understood, only obeyed. And young Adaeze would nod and go home and lie awake in the darkness, wondering what always really meant, and who had decided it, and whether they had ever been wrong. Her father was a farmer, a quiet, patient man named Emeka, who loved the land the way some men love a woman, tenderly, faithfully, without expectation. Her mother had died when Adaeze was 12, a sudden illness that came in the night and left before morning, taking Chidima with it. Since then, it had been just the two of them, father and daughter, moving through the seasons of Amara with the careful practice rhythm of people who have learned that life can be taken without warning. Emeka never spoke about the pot. He never needed to. Whenever Adaeze's eyes drifted towards the baobab tree at the center of the village, he would simply place his hand on her shoulder, not firmly, not harshly, just enough to say, "I see you, and I am asking you to look away." For years, that hand was enough. But the year Adaeze turned 23, The hand was no longer there. Her father had fallen ill at the start of the dry season. Not gravely, not yet, but enough that he spent his days on his mat, breathing carefully, while Adaeze managed the farm alone and tried not to show him how frightened she was. And then the rain stopped. Completely, without warning. 3 weeks into the planting season, the sky simply closed. The river dropped. The soil hardened. Seeds that had been placed into the ground with hope just sat there, dried and still, like small stones. The village began to struggle. And with struggle came fear. And with fear came whispers. The whispers started at the market. They always started at the market. Someone, no one could ever say who exactly, had begun saying that the answer to the drought was in the pot. That sealed inside it was something powerful, something capable of calling the rains, restoring the harvest, healing the sick. The ancestors put power in there, not danger, the voices said. The elders just want to keep it for themselves. Adaeze heard these whispers the way a fire hears wind. She did not want to believe them. She told herself they were the desperate imaginings of hungry, frightened people who needed something to hope for. She told herself this several times a day. But hope, when you are desperate, has a very loud voice. And her father was getting worse. She went to the village healer, a sharp-eyed woman named Ngozi, who mixed herbs with prayer and had more practical knowledge in her hands than most people carried in their entire bodies. The illness will pass, Ngozi told her, but he needs nourishment, real food, not the dried scraps the village is surviving on. Then give me something that will make the rains come, Adaeze said, only half joking. Ngozi looked at her for a long moment. Be careful what you go looking for, child, she said quietly. Some solutions cost. For that night, Adaeze could not sleep. She lay in the dark and listened to her father's shallow breathing from across the room. She thought about seeds sitting dry in cracked earth. She thought about the children in the village, thinner now, quieter now, with eyes that had lost a certain brightness that hunger steals first. She thought about the pot. Just look at it closely, she told herself. You do not have to open it. Just look. She went the next morning before dawn. She stood before the great baobab and studied the pot in the pale grey light. It was about the height of her knee, dark brown clay, almost black with age. The seal was dried wax, mixed with something she could not name. It smelled faintly of iron and old rain. Around the neck of the pot, someone had tied a cord of braided grass, 7 knots, old but still tight. She counted them, 7. She did not know why 7. She did not know what it meant, but she turned and went home, and she did not open it. Not that morning. It took 3 more days. 3 more days of watching her father weaken. 3 more days of dry sky. 3 more days of children crying, and elders meeting, and prayers rising from every corner of Amara without answer. On the 3rd night, old Mama Uchenna, the oldest woman in the village, 93 years old, with eyes like still water, came and sat beside Adaeze outside her father's hut. You are thinking about the pot, the old woman said, not a question. I am thinking about my father, Adaeze replied. I know. Mama Uchenna was quiet for a moment. Then, Adaeze, whatever is in that pot was not placed there to help us. It was placed there because it could not be destroyed. There is a difference between something powerful and something good. Never confuse the two. What if the village is dying? Then we die with our covenant intact. There are worse things than dying. There are things that make you wish you could. Adaeze said nothing. She helped the old woman home. She went to bed, and at the deepest, most silent hour of the night, she got up. What happened next? The elders of Amara would debate for the rest of their lives. Some said the pot opened itself. Some said the darkness was already awake and Adaeze simply gave it a door. What we know is this: no one who stood close enough to see it clearly was ever the same again. The village was completely still, the kind of still that does not feel peaceful. It feels held, like something enormous is breathing very slowly nearby, and you instinctively stop making noise. Adaeze walked to the baobab tree. The pot sat waiting. Up close, in the darkness, it seemed larger than it had in daylight, as if it expanded in the absence of weaknesses. She knelt beside it. Her hands shook, not from cold, but from something her body understood before her mind did. Turn back, something in her whispered. Turn back right now. She thought of her father. She reached for the braided cord. The 7 knots came undone in her fingers, one by one, as if they had been loosened by time and were only waiting for a hand willing enough to finish what patience had started. She gripped the seal. She pulled. It did not resist. It came away smoothly, silently, and for one single suspended moment, the world held perfectly still. Adaeze looked into the mouth of the pot. She saw nothing, just black, just deep, absolute black, the kind of darkness that has no bottom, no walls, no edge you can find with your eyes. And then she felt it, not saw it, felt it, a cold that moved upward, slow and deliberate, the way water rises, not the way wind blows. It touched her face, and in that cold, she felt something she had no language for, something between grief and terror, and the particular loneliness of realizing you have made a mistake so large it has already finished happening before you fully understand what you've done. She tried to replace the lid. It shattered in her hands. The darkness rose. It did not pour outward the way liquid does, or billow the way smoke does. It unfolded, like something that had been held in a very small space for a very long time, finally remembering how large it truly was. It moved through Amara in silence. No roar, no crack of thunder, no dramatic signal, just silence, spreading outward from the baobab tree, consuming the ordinary night sounds the way a hand smothers a candle. First, the animals felt it. Every dog in Amara began to howl simultaneously. then stopped and ran into the bush without looking back. Then the river. Villagers who lived closest to the water said they heard it happen. A sound like a long, slow exhale, and then the river was gone. Not low, not reduced, gone. Dry bed, cracked mud, not a drop. And then the children, 11 children across the village, in separate homes, none of them connected except by the shared air of Amara, fell into a sleep that no one could wake them from. Breathing, warm, alive in every measurable way, but as if something had pulled them just one step to the side of the world where the rest of us live, close enough to see, too far to touch. By the time the village woke to understand what was happening, the sky above Amara had turned the color of a bruise, and Adaeze was still kneeling at the base of the baobab tree, holding the broken pieces of a sail that could never be repaired. Amara did not collapse in a single moment. It collapsed the way grief works, in waves. First came the shock, the running, the screaming of mothers over children who would not open their eyes. The elders arriving at the baobab to find Adaeze on her knees in the dirt, the broken pot beside her, unable to speak. Then came the anger, the kind of anger that lives inside helplessness because it has nowhere to go, and so it goes everywhere. Neighbors who had shared food, shared celebrations, shared the long ordinary intimacy of village life, turned away from each other. The search for blame moved through Amara faster than the darkness had. Everyone saw Adaeze, everyone knew, and yet knowing did not fix a single thing. Her father was told what she had done. Emeka did not shout. He did not weep. He simply looked at his daughter from his mat, his sick, thin, careful face, and said nothing for a very long time. Then he turned towards the wall. That silence broke something in Adaeze that the darkness itself had not managed to reach. She stopped eating. She sat in the hut and felt the weight of 11 sleeping children pressing on her chest like stones. She thought about their mothers, their fathers, the way a sleeping child who cannot be woken looks so peaceful and so wrong at the same time. Healers came from other villages, priests and prayer leaders and herbalists with knowledge from different traditions. They tried everything they knew. Some things they tried twice. Nothing moved the children. Nothing brought the river back. And above Amara, the bruised sky remained, neither fully dark nor fully light, as if the sun itself was uncertain whether this village still deserved its warmth. On the 6th day, Mama Uchenna came to Adaeze. The old woman did not bring herbs, did not bring prayers. She brought only herself and the particular kind of presence that only people who have outlived most of their mistakes can carry. She sat beside Adaeze in silence for a long time. Then she spoke. "Do you know what that pot truly contained?" Adaeze shook her head. "Consequence," the old woman said simply. "Pure, undiluted consequence. The ancestors of Amara, long before your time or mine, once tried to use a great power to override nature. They wanted to control what was never meant to be controlled. And when that power struck back, it could not be destroyed. So the wisest among them gathered what remained of it, sealed it, and placed it where the whole village could see it every single day." She paused. "Not to hide it, to remember it." "To remember what?" Adaeze whispered. "That there are forces in this world larger than human desire. that wanting something badly enough is not the same as being ready for it, and that the warnings we inherit from those who loved us, even when we don't understand them, we are paid for with suffering we were never meant to repeat. Adaeze wept, not the helpless, desperate weeping of the days before, something older, quieter, the kind of weeping that comes after a person has finally, fully accepted the weight of what they have done. Can it be reversed? Everything can be moved, Mama Uchenna said carefully, but nothing is free. What was released must be addressed with the same honesty that should have stopped it from being released. Truth, spoken openly, without excuse, without defense, is the only thing that old darkness ever respected. The next morning, Adaeze stood in the center of Amara. She had not been asked to. No elder had summoned her. No chief had demanded it. She simply stood there in the open space before the baobab and waited until the village gathered around her. And then she spoke. Not an explanation, not a justification, just truth. I was afraid for my father. I was afraid for all of us. I thought my reason was good enough to break what was sacred. I was wrong. My intentions did not protect any of you. And I am sorry, not with words, but with whatever I have left to give. The silence that followed was not comfortable. It was not forgiving exactly, but it was real. And something in the air above Amara shifted. By midday, a single cloud appeared. By evening, the sky had changed. Before the night was fully dark, rain. Gentle at first, then steady, then the full, generous rain of a sky that has been holding something back for too long and finally lets it go. The children woke, one by one, over the course of that long night. Each one returned to the world quietly, like someone stepping through a doorway from one room into another. Mothers held their children and could not find words. They did not need words. The river returned by morning, not flooding, not dramatic, just water, moving again in the way water does, as if it had simply gone somewhere important for a while, and now it was home. Amara did not celebrate, not loudly, not immediately. There was too much grief still fresh, too much that had been broken, not by the darkness, but by fear and blame and the particular damage that communities do to themselves when they are frightened. That healing would take longer than a single night of rain, but it had begun. And the lesson of Adaeze, the lesson that Amara carved from that year forward into the base of the great baobab tree was this: a warning is not a wall built to keep you small. It is a door built by people who loved you enough to walk through the pain first so you would not have to. Curiosity is a gift, but wisdom is knowing that the right question is not always what is inside. Sometimes the right question is, am I truly ready for the answer? African storytelling has carried this truth for thousands of years, not because our ancestors were afraid of knowledge, but because they understood something we are still learning, that knowledge without readiness is a fire without a hearth. It does not warm the house, it burns it. Adaeze lived a long life. She never left Amara. She became, in time, the village's most trusted keeper of stories, because the village understood that no one respected a warning more than someone who had broken one. She told the story of the pot to every young person who would sit still long enough to hear it, and she always ended it the same way. The ancestors are not trying to limit you, she would say. They are trying to love you across time. The question is whether you are patient enough to receive that love before you learn it the hard way. That is the power of African folk tales. They do not simply entertain, they remember for us the things we might otherwise have to suffer to learn. If this story reached something in you, if you felt it somewhere deeper than the words, then you already belong here. Subscribe to this channel. New African stories are waiting, each one carrying a truth that has survived centuries because it was worth keeping. Share this with someone who needs a reminder today. And remember, the pot that was sealed with love. Honor the love before you test the seal.